Hello, I'm delighted to be here today, and I've so enjoyed the speakers so far. I wanted to start a little bit by talking about boomers and millennials, which we've talked about as though you were different species. So, of the millennials here, can you put up your hands? How many of you have at least one boomer parent? Okay, of the boomers here, how many of you have at least one millennial child? So we are so intertwined. I'm a late bloomer boomer in that I'm 1963, and I have 4 millennial children born between 1992 and 2003. So their well-being is essential to my well-being, and my well-being is essential to their well-being. And I think that even though we're so highly entwined, we don't know a heck of a lot about each other. So, oops, is this gonna work? Oop. Ooh, I'm not sure if I can go back. But anyway, I'm gonna start a little bit. This is a cover of a 1976 New York magazine, all about the me generation, talking about those nasty boomers who were terribly, terribly self-centered. And that's what the older generation thought of us. This is the Time magazine in 2013 talking about the me generation and those millennials who are going to ruin our lives. So I think the older generation, back since Socrates, has thought the younger generation were degenerates. But really, what do we know about each other going up and down the spectrum? So, okay, now I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to just pause for a minute and commit to a number. Okay, when does old begin? And you all have to stick with that number. Okay, millennials, put up your hand. All right, now you can put your hand down, keep your hand up, but put your hand down when I get to the age at which you think that old begins. 30. 40 or less. 50 or less. Okay, some hands are going down here. 60 or less. Okay, more than half of them are down. All right, how about 70 or less? And bless your soul over there, you millennials. What age were you going to say? 80, yes, okay. So now, boomers and Gen Xers, put your hands up. How many of you thought 30 or less? 40 or less? You can put your hands down when I get to the number. 50 or less? 60 or less? 70 or less? Not much movement here. 80 or less? Over 80. And you've got a good portion. Okay, so it turns out that Angus Reid did a poll this week and just published it. And for millennials age 18 to 24, they thought old began at 58. Boomers thought age 55 to 64, thought old began at 75, and those age 65 and up thought it began at 81. And there was an old phrase, when is old? It's always 15 years at least older than you are, right? So I think we're just don't really get it. I mean, old feels old. And in fact, I asked my child when he was 8 how old he thought I was. And he said, oh, you're really old. And I said, how old? And he says, 20. So it's all a matter of perspective. Okay, so what's our view about being a boomer and moving into old age? There's a heck of a lot of this that was all about midlife crises and despair and distress. And it's not that this doesn't exist, but if you look at the Freedom 55 magazines, it's all lightness and the best time of your life. So I decided that I wanted to find out who's doing well and who isn't doing well among the boomers. And first of all, I had to decide what's complete mental health. So I define myself, I'm a social work professor here, and I'm a long-term social worker, and I define myself as a mental health researcher. But I have to tell you the truth. I'm a mental illness researcher. For 20 years or 20 plus years now, I've been looking at depression. I've been looking at suicide. I've been looking at anxiety. And on good days, I'm looking at remission from depression, remission from suicide. But that really isn't what I want for myself or my millennial children or if patients. I don't want that to be the reality. So if I came up to you and I said, how are you doing today? And you said to me, I'm not suicidal, I would have grave concerns about your well-being. Red lights would go on, I'd be making phone calls, I'd be really concerned. But how come as a researcher or a social science researcher, I thought that that was sufficient? So I want you to think a little bit about what is complete mental health. Okay, I think we can probably all agree it's the absence of mental illness. But what am I hoping for myself and for my kids? I mean, and think for a minute, what's in this? What would it look like? And I'm going to share with you what a brilliant researcher in Corey Keyes, who's at Emory University in Atlanta, has come up with. Okay, section C, we can all agree that you can't be depressed, you can't be anxious, you can't be bipolar, you can't be abusing substances, and you can't be suicidal in the last year. Okay, that's a good starting place, but that's just a starting place. But now he's getting at section A. In addition to not being mentally ill, when I ask you in the last month, how often have you been happy? You need to say every day or almost every day. If you say once a week, you don't make my cut. I'm looking for optimal complete mental health. Or you can, when I ask you how satisfied you are, you have to say, I'm satisfied with my life every day or almost every day. Okay, this is sounding a little bit more what I want to be working for. And then section B, there's a whole set of questions on psychological well-being. I like most parts of my personality. And social well-being. I have warm and supportive relationships. There's also questions on I have a sense of purpose and meaning in my life. And there's a whole set of them, there's 11 questions. You have to agree to 6 of them every day or almost every day. Okay. No mental illness, happy and satisfied on an almost daily basis, and social connectedness, social well-being, psychological well-being. Okay, I'm with you. This is what I'm looking for. So the question is, where am I going to do it? So I should tell you a little bit of the background. So Statistics Canada, luckily, in 2012, included all of these questions in a really big survey. So I pulled out the 6,000 boomers and tried to figure out who's doing well and who's not. They had a good response rate. It was representative. This is what's going on in Canada, we can say fairly confidently. So the question is, how are boomers doing? But first of all, because we're connecting millennials and boomers, the first question probably is, if I can get this to work, what percent of millennials are in complete mental health? And I'm going to make you commit to a number, and we're going to vote on it. Okay. How many people think under 10%? Under 20%, hands up. Under 30%, under 40. Okay, we got more than half up. Under 50, under 60, under 70, under 80. Anyone above 80? Not an optimist in the house. Well, it's not too bad. 68%. So more than 2 out of 3 are saying every day, or almost every day, I'm happy and satisfied with my life. I have warm and supportive relationships, and I have no mental health illness problems. That's pretty impressive. Oh, this is not very impressive. What happened here? Okay. But now I'm going to make you, I'm trying to compare that with the boomers. All right, first of all, do you think the boomers are doing better or worse? Let's vote. Better. Worse. Oh, it's 50-50. Okay. Well, the answer is better. 3 out of 4 boomers, 74%, are in complete mental health. So the next question is, how did they get there? Now, I don't have experimental data. I just know what their characteristics are. So if you were thinking about yourselves, your loved ones, people who would match that, what do you think they have going for them that helped promote it? And what do you think they have going for them that might have, or not going for them, but what do you think might have stopped them from reaching complete mental health this month, this year, this decade? And I'll tell you a little bit about what we found from our data, that women are doing a bit better. Women have about 34% higher odds of complete mental health. Married boomers have about 24% higher odds than unmarried or divorced. This was an interesting question. People who turned to, oops. Oh, gosh. Can you help me with that? Okay, so there was a question about, do you turn to religion or spirituality to cope with your day-to-day problems? And we found that if you said yes, you had 33% higher odds of complete mental health, that it seemed to help with day-to-day struggles. Not surprisingly, higher income made a difference, and the big difference was from the poorest to the richest. So if you're in the bottom 10th percentile, which would be people in quite severe poverty, you're not doing that well. If you're in the top 20 percentile, you're quite affluent, among boomers in particular. So the difference between the bottom and the top, the people at the top were about twice as likely to be in complete mental health, and it's what we call a dose response. As you go up the ladder, financially, you do a little bit better. But the next factor was the most fascinating to me, and I think perhaps maybe the most exciting. If you had a confidant, you were 3.5 times more likely to be in complete mental health. Somebody that you can turn to when you're stressed, somebody who's got your back. So 3.5 times. That's 350% more likely. The other ones I'm talking to you about are 33% more likely. Even going from the poorest to the richest is only twice. We're talking 3.5 times. There are a lot of isolated people out there, and having a confidant is a huge predictor of mental health. It actually also improves physical health outcomes as well, but with mental health, it's really key. Not surprisingly, there are several things that were impediments to fully flourishing. And, well, anyway, not surprisingly, if you'd had a history of alcoholism at any point in your life, you're only about half as likely to be in complete mental health. We think that means when you're facing stressors, you might turn to drink, which is a very negative coping strategy. And that impacts everything else, your financial well-being, your relationships, your marital status, your confidant. It's a big cascade spiral down. Physical health, okay, you're helping me with this? All right. Physical health was not surprisingly really important. If you reported that you were in good to excellent health, you were about 80% more likely than if you were in poor or fair health. And we know that even on a day-to-day basis, when you're down with bronchitis, you don't really feel as well. It's a little harder to be happy. But other issues like disabilities, they also about halved your ability to be in complete mental health. But keep in mind, 75% of boomers are flourishing, or 74% are flourishing. Chronic sleep problems also made a difference. So that's something we need to think about doing interventions on those levels. And not surprisingly, if you, at some point in your life, you suffered from major depression or a major anxiety disorder, you also were less likely to be in complete mental health. But still many, many are flourishing. We've done other research across the lifespan and found that 40% of people who had had a major depressive disorder are flourishing, happy every day. no mental illness, no substance abuse. So it isn't a death sentence, or it doesn't condemn you not to be in complete mental health, but it certainly is an impediment. So the take-homes are that 3 and 4 boomers are flourishing. Boomers are more likely to be in complete mental health than millennials, but both groups are doing surprisingly well. And I think that the reason people voted so much lower than was the reality is because researchers like myself have tended to focus on mental illness, and we've really publicized the negative things when in fact most people are doing very well. That interventions to improve social support and decrease insomnia and improve disability may hold promise for increasing complete mental health among boomers. And researchers are happier when they study complete mental health rather than mental illness. You know, it was honestly going to parties and saying, what do? I study depression, anxiety, suicide. It's total Debbie Downer. So I love being able to go and say, I look at people who are flourishing and who are happy every day. So this is the next 20 years of my career, God willing. All right, thank you.